A shrill voice cut through the icy spring air of the village.
"I'm gonna beat you until there's nothing left to hit, you little weasel."
The voice belonged to a young girl, perhaps about 12. She was running after a boy who was staying well ahead of her despite the fact he was so noticeably smaller. That she was soaking wet had not slowed her by even the smallest bit. "Not if you don't catch me." His voice came back in pants. Farn was beginning to feel the stress of keeping his lead. He was also starting to admit it might not have been wise to pour that icy water over her head, especially since he was so far from the inn that represented safety, his safety in particular. Tara's growl was a dark prophecy.
"You can't keep running forever."
"Neither can you." He was already getting a cramp in his side.
"The longer you run, the worse you're gonna get it."
Tara was beginning to sound a little breathy too. He might just make it. He chanced to look over his shoulder and squeaked. Her hand was nearly within grabbing distance. And after grabbing came... He closed his eyes tight and poured on the speed. A satisfying growl of frustration came from behind him. He opened his eyes just in time to turn onto the wide path that rose along the cliff face. It was all uphill from here, but at least that went for both of them. She wouldn't have it any easier. The problem was that he knew he couldn't keep up his speed until he reached the top of the cliff. He tried a different tack. "Tara, you hungry yet?" He could barely get out the words. A growl answered from way too close behind him. That sound lent him another burst of energy that he put to good use. She rarely got this mad, but when she did... He groaned. He was only halfway up the path. Ahead, he saw some broken brush that had fallen from the top of the cliff. Taking a chance, he veered closer to the cliff wall and jumped over the mound. He immediately heard the sound of her hitting the brush pile and then a soft thud. He kept running but glanced over his shoulder. Tara was face down on the ground with her legs tangled in the brush. Farn's feet skidded to a halt so fast he nearly fell. She wasn't moving. Farn broke into a trot back toward her. "Tara, you hurt?" She still didn't move. "Tara?" He wondered if she had knocked herself unconscious. "Tara, come on you. Get up." He reached down, his face bunched up with worry. "Tara." He laid his hand on her shoulder. It was tensed like a steel spring. He jumped back the moment before her hands grabbed for him. Backing up, he continued to watch her. Her breeches were bloody and torn at the knees. He could see bloody scrapes on her arms and hands and a bruise on her forehead. She hadn't been faking. Tara really had fallen. She had just tried to take advantage of it, the same way he had taken advantage of the brush. Farn sighed and sat down on the path. Tara stared at him like a hawk would look at a mouse waving a flag. Her hands worked at the tangle that was grabbing her legs. "Can I help?" He tried to move closer and got a dark look from Tara that caused him to sit back again. Or not. It took several seconds for her to get herself free, and then she looked at her pants and bent her head forward. Water dripped from the rough-cut locks that hung down around her face. The slight points of her ears poked through the matted hair, a gift from her elvish father. No one knew who he had been, and nobody admitted to seeing his face. He had just stayed a single winter's night at the inn and left the next morning. Tara had come into the world that fall. He suddenly realized that she was shivering in the cold and that the silence had been going on for some time. "Listen, I'm really sore." She was on him so fast he never even saw it coming. Her bloodied hand was wrapped in the front of his shirt, staining it. Her face was so close to his that he could make out the flakes of gold in her dark eyes. "Don't you say it." Her voice sounded distant, and he was finding it hard to breathe with the cloth bunched up around his neck. "Don't you ever say it." Farn nodded as his vision blacked out toward the edges. All he could see were her eyes. Old Joseph always said that the eyes were the windows to the soul. Tara's always looked so empty, so endless, especially when she got into one of these moods. The town called her a changeling and refused to let any of their children play with her. Even his parents had tried to keep him away from her, but he had snuck off to the inn so many times to play with her that they had given up. The other kids had told him that she was going to steal his soul. He had laughed at them and gotten both Tara and himself beat up for his trouble. He had tried to apologize then, too. Tara had just placed a hand over his mouth to stop him. He never forgot the quiet, almost frightening words she had said that day.
Never tell me you're sorry, because that would mean you're sorry that you're my friend.
Now that her eyes were taking up his entire view, though, he felt his mind wandering. What if she was a changeling, come to steal his soul? The next thought that filtered through the muddle of his mind was that someone, he couldn't remember who, had told him they stole it with a kiss. But then again, Joseph had said that all girls did that.
Farn, are you even listening to me? Don't make me hit you.
Farn suddenly realized she was no longer gripping his shirt. Got dizzy. He looked at her and tried to think of what to say. You're hurt. We should get you back to the inn. Tara made a face and looked at her hands.
Mama's gonna kill me over my pants. They were almost new.
Farn nodded, knowing full well that Tara's mother would never even scold her. Brianna never got angry and had never raised her hand to anyone. She would be upset when she saw the blood, though. You could see how it hurt her every time her daughter came home from another fight with a kid from the village. Lately, Tara and Farn had taken to avoiding the other children altogether. But it was a small village, and they still ran into them way too often. Farn was sure that Joseph would tan his hide for him once he told him what happened. It didn't matter if he was his father or not, because he acted like everyone's father, especially Tara's. Joseph had been there the night she was born and treated her as if she were his own. Your leg's okay? Yeah. She sounded tired. He thought about it. Need me to carry you?
You?
Not likely. Her face formed into a smirk. He stood, looking up the path, and once more weighed his chances. If they were going to get in trouble, why not? They say changelings don't weigh anything because they're made of... He heard Tara scrabble to her feet and bellow out a yell of mock rage. Farn was already running for the inn. He wondered if he would make it.